for a person who's not familiar with 5-MeO, can you briefly, like, it doesn't have to be long, explain what is 5-MeO or BUFO?
Yeah, so we're talking about 5-methoxydimethyltryptamine, and this is also found in the secretions of the Sonoran desert toad, and the shorthand for that is like BUFO, or sometimes called toad medicine, or BUFO secretions. And this is in the tryptamine family, so it has the basic tryptamine structure of the indole alkaloid. And this is very familiar to mammalian biochemistry. I already mentioned serotonin. That is a tryptamine. It has the indole alkaloid. Melatonin, the neurotransmitter that tells us it's time to go to bed, that's also a tryptamine structure. And human bodies also produce trace amounts, and this is true for all mammals. We produce trace amounts of DMT and 5-MeO DMT. And just by point of comparison, within psilocybin mushrooms, psilocybin and psilocin are also the basic tryptamine structure. They just have something added at a different place on the molecular structure. So this is a really basic neurotransmitter structure. And 5-MeO DMT has a methoxylated group at the 5 position. This is where the 5-MeO comes from. And the dimethyltryptamine is a reference to the base molecule. So this is a psychedelic molecule that can be taken in its pure form, generally produced by a lab, and it comes in different forms of salt versions, fumarate, or freebase. Or it can be found in the secretions of the Sonoran desert toad, also known as the Colorado River toad. And when you smoke or vaporize it, it immediately crosses the blood-brain barrier and is extraordinarily potent. So many people are more familiar with DMT, and DMT is like 10 times weaker than 5-MeO DMT. And also, the way that I analyze it, that people smoke DMT and they say, well, I see aliens and angels and other worlds and all of this stuff. And so one of the things I like to point out is that, okay, so that's still engaging the ego, because there's still subject-object duality that takes place within most DMT experiences. Like, I was off in some other alternate dimension, and I was talking to these higher beings inside their spaceship. Okay, that's all filtered through the ego. I was there with these others, and they were not me, and I was somewhere else. So DMT tends to actually amplify the ego in certain ways, whereas 5-MeO DMT is so incredibly powerful that it actually has the capacity to completely override the energetic structures of the human ego within a few seconds. It does not happen automatically, because the ego can always choose to fight, and then there could be unconscious aspects of the ego that do not let go within the experience. But assuming all conditions are perfect, you take your hit inhaling, and before you even start exhaling, it's, oh my God, it's happening, and there's this sense of all of reality is dissolving and turning into pure energy. You completely lose sight of where you are, you lose track of your body, and you very quickly lose your sense of yourself. So for you, it's Igor. For me, it's Martin. And that's just, it's like, oh my God, it's going away. And then that divide between subject and object, me and not me, self and not self, individual and world or universe and reality, that divide falls away. And everything presents as one unified totality. And this is often felt in the body as this energy of absolute love, or this sense of ecstasy, or this sense of perfection. And for some people in that moment, it's like it's every possible thing is present at once, but there is no thing there, because it's all possibilities and all potentials. And for others, it might present as it's just absolute emptiness that is alive. So there's different ways that it presents, but in this non-dual experience where there's no two, there's no me and whatever's not me, there's only the oneness, it presents as immediate and as obvious and as infinite and eternal. So it's just like, that's why I use the word God. It's like this is a consciousness and being that is eternal and infinite, and it's made out of this energy of unconditional love. And even if that is achieved, that level of awareness, that will only last for maybe 10 or 15 minutes at the most, and then the energy starts to die down. And as the energy dies down, the energetic patterns of the ego are able to reform and reconstruct themselves. But usually at that point, as the ego comes back on, all of a sudden the person realizes, like, holy shit, I am tripping harder than I even thought it was possible to ever trip. What the hell is going on here? So that individuated sense of self starts to return. And then if that ego doesn't do anything, it just relaxes, another 10 to 15 minutes after that, you will be completely back down to baseline. So the whole experience lasts for at most maybe 30 minutes, usually more within a 15 to 20 minute window. It's assuming you just take one hit of it. So it's very fast acting. It's incredibly powerful. And it, more so than any other psychedelic, seems to have the ability to just completely disrupt and dissolve the habitual patterning of the ego. Whereas most psychedelics, they just disrupt the patterning of the ego. So it's like, oh, I've reconfigured, oh, this is the different experience, this is the different experience, but it's still, the person is still there having that experience, and they still know that they are themselves all the way through that, including most experiences with DMT. But 5-MeO DMT has this capacity just to completely dissolve that sense of self within a few seconds. So it's rather startling. And even when people have had decades of experience with psychedelics, they're still astounded the first time they have a 5-MeO experience, because it goes beyond what they think psychedelics can do. So it can be very startling in that sense. But that's kind of 5-MeO in a nutshell.
Yeah.